Becky, Reese,
Ayla,
Morgan.
I'm Branwen.
21.
I am 35.
I'm 21 years old.
I'm 38.
I'm 21.
My sexual identity is queer.
Gay.
Lesbian.
Is bisexual, although I have been given this some thought as to whether or not the pansexual label better fits, but at the moment I am comfortable with bi.
My present sexual identity is lesbian, but I also identify with queer as well.
Non-binary.
Female.
Male. Cis male.
I wish I knew. At the moment I'm kind of going as just non-binary, but I am actively looking for something that fits better because I don't really feel comfort with being a woman, and I don't know if I feel comfortable with being a man.
Cis female.
Male. Cis male.
Once my mum said to me, oh, don't say lesbian, just say gay, or, you know, something a little bit more palatable, because for some reason lesbian, les just doesn't sound nice.
Still give someone hope that, oh my God, there's a future for me to have this future that you want me to have.
When a person doesn't label themselves, it either means that they're in a place of privilege in which they don't have to, or that they feel lost.
Somebody said to me, are you sure you want to come out to your students? And I thought, where in any other educational institution is there a problem about two members in a faculty being married? And they said, oh, well, you know. And I said, what? I don't know. I don't know what you mean, you know, almost as if it's naughtier or not as respectable to be married to somebody that was then of the same gender as me.
You have the word like faggot or whatever thrown at you, even for kissing an ex-boyfriend that people knew I was with.
When you grow up in a society that doesn't really acknowledge you, then that's why a label can be helpful.
I'm someone who I love labels. Like I want as many labels as possible so I can kind of narrowly define who and what I am.
How to have safe sex as a lesbian. So like I didn't know there were such things as finger condoms. I didn't know there was dental dam.
Being part of the LGBTQIA community has offered me quite a few opportunities in my job where, like for instance, I am an LGBT role model at the university. I'm one of the members of staff and I'm the trans role model because apparently there's only one non-binary person that works in the university. Oh. That's not true.
People have become so good at hiding it.
So yeah, definitely that's my community. Yeah.
And so having somebody that speaks authentically from that experience is really useful in terms of coming out, in terms of employment and representation, in terms of the fact that I'm civilly partnered and why I haven't chosen to be married, for example, or to be upgraded, as it were, to marital status.
I kissed a boy in Ponty or went out and got with a boy and someone of my mother's friends saw and then went on and like sent a photo to my mother being like why you take a photo of it, I don't know.
Yeah.
Why send a photo, I don't know. And then have a conversation like, oh yeah, I saw Morgan with, and my mother was like, what? So she obviously rushed home from work and was like, felt sick because it was such a thing because I'm the only boy, child, whatever. And for then her to think, I'm not going to have grandchildren, I'm not going to this, I'm not going to that. It was hard.
Male advances, which did happen a lot in the early part of my career. And as soon as I said the word lesbian, you know, it sort of put me off limits. And so some of those conversations or ways into the industry that some people might take, even if it's just simple flirtatious, or even just the possibility of there being some form of attraction, some sort of dalliance. All of that, wasn't on the cards as soon as I said the word lesbian.
With lesbians, it's like, oh, go on, kiss your girlfriend in front of me. And with boys, it's like, oh my God, you're going to kiss me, fuck off.
We experience things in a way that other people don't.
Oh, yeah, queer. And for me, queer is also political, and it's critical of the discourse kind of thing. And so, yeah, for me, it's more than just a sexuality. It's a way of thinking and a community. Yeah.
It wasn't until I thought I had a wife, and I now have a spouse because my partner is non-binary. But it wasn't until I was civilly partnered to somebody that I felt I had this sort of, this clout behind me, this legitimate thing that I could show to people and kind of go, this is real, this is a real thing. Yeah. And also that it's respectable. So for example, if I go into a bank or a shop or whatever, and I say my wife or my spouse, there's this level of credibility that comes with it where people don't question. Whereas if I said my girlfriend, people's heads turn. Or, if I say my partner, and then my partner, and they can see my non-binary partner coming towards me, and they're going, oh, well, that person is female bodied currently, so therefore that person's a lesbian. And there's just, you can see all of the cogs turning in their minds, like looking at the two of us together. And so you're constantly having to come out in that sense, that is to be highlighted, that is different. And I suppose me on my own as quite a female presenting female person, the only time when I have to come out is when I'm with my partner, when I'm with my spouse, or when I'm buying something for my spouse, or I'm doing something on behalf of my spouse. But that's, how many times a day is that? That's all the time.
There's like these things called neopronouns, which are essentially new gender neutral singular pronouns. So I quite like the ones, it's an X and then an E for like, it's like they, I pronounce it they.
Oh my God, you're going to get bullied. Like, I'd gone through that already before you even knew about it.
That you're assumed straight until proven otherwise.
I feel like it creates like an other and a them.
Have you ever questioned your sexual or gender identity?
Every day.
But I know someone who maybe did something more masculine, like played rugby or football or something, would maybe struggle a little bit more than I have.
I mean, personally, labels have been really helpful for me.
Be negative. Because if you haven't got control over that aspect, if someone does it for you, or did for that aspect, I feel like that's where it really comes into play as a negative thing.
And I love saying the word lesbian because it's really quite blunt. Yeah. Rather than gay or rather than queer, which I think I like to really put forward my pride in being female and for being a lesbian. That is what I am. I'm not gay. I'm a lesbian, and feeling.
The most amazing sexual health clinic in London, in Europe, were looking for a trans or non-binary psychosexual therapist. So I applied for it and I got it.
Oh,
so
well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. So actually, being non-binary enabled me to apply for that kind of job and get the job.
I didn't have that experience of being honest in school, so I think you kind of live in a lie, which I do regret, but then I don't feel like I was ready to.
Labels help people to feel less alone, like even like kind of all-encompassing ones like queer, because it's like, oh, I'm queer, you're queer, like the queer community, like, the trans community, the gay community. It's having that label allows you to connect with people who may not have had the same experience of you, but
Yeah.
have similar ones, and there is kind of the common thread of like understanding.
But I found myself just in the company of so many genderqueer people, and I used to love going there on a Tuesday evening, and these really cool queer cabaret performances used to happen, and there was a proper sense of belonging and celebration, and kind of like being together and being strong together, and it was like it was that kind of attitude of, well, who would want to be straight when you can be queer in this kind of night?
So lesbian as a word for me isn't frightening, it isn't scary, it isn't something that I'm hesitant to say, because those people fought for a world where I could hold somebody else's hand who was the same gender as me, and really embrace that and embrace my identity.
Like a drama school, the representation within teachers, within the industry, within jobs, casting, everything, I think seeing a lot of people like me has made it a lot easier for like me and my family to come to terms with it, and for me to like be open about it.
I get misgendered all the time. So that's a negative experience.
But I remember distinctly like her saying like, how do you know you're bisexual, or like how do you know? And I remember just kind of looking at her and wanting a scrap, but just looking at her and being like, well, how do you know you're straight?
Classes in schools are the perfect opportunity to speak about LGBTQI plus relationships, because the younger you start talking to children about them, the more normal it is for children, and they don't have to grow up in fear, they don't have to educate themselves when they could be educated at school just like heterosexuals are.
Past relationship, for example, it was really sexualized.
There are a lot of people who look at a label and they feel a need to like compress themselves to fit into it.
It was like, how can I perceive this as romantic when you are literally doing something that is like in an area which is perceived as dirty? And
I used to love speaking to older lesbians and to hear about all of the cool rallies and stuff that they went through, and what they've got now to show for it is our, marriage equality. It's our presence in the media.
it was very like right then over.
Because obviously like you've grown up in the Rhondda Valleys, it's kind of a bit stifling.
An automatic thing on sex all the time. Being gay is sex.
There's loads of people who are like me, like I'm not alone.
Like condoms are a big thing, like PrEP's a big thing. Those kind of things made me feel like, as PrEP especially, made me feel less dirty.
Because you don't have to understand it, you just have to respect it.
Frightening, and I've never had to go through that experience of being frightened. I've always been able to hold somebody's hand in the street.
You would say they are going to the shop or something.
I suppose the only negative experience I've had has been the process of having to come out repeatedly, and that I have to even discuss my sexual orientation in so many different spaces. That's really frustrating.
There's a loneliness in trying to find out like who and what was. People had pronoun badges on, like people were like snogging their girlfriends, like full on, like just gays as far as the eye can see them. And I remember that as one of like the happiest nights of my life.
I suppose the only time I feel pressure is when people challenge me on it. So for instance, maybe straight women who grew up around some men who were called queer when they were younger, for instance, or because I think the word queer creates some tension in some people because they grew up in a time when it was a bad word.
Fear, like I think there is always a level of fear that people won't accept you, especially if you know that people won't.
So because I kind of came out big, you know, I came out when I was a teenager as somebody who wasn't straight, and then in my early 30s I came out as somebody who wasn't cisgender. So I've had two big coming out experiences, and actually the first time it wasn't that bad. I don't think I experienced any homophobic bullying or anything. I know when I was in school there was a bit of weirdness. You know, I had these two friends who were also gay, and we used to hang out, and they all used to make fun of us a little bit. But then that didn't really get to me. I'm quite good. I've been able to kind of avoid being bullied just because I don't give it the energy it needs. But I suppose the most negative thing that's been happening to me recently is because, again,
kind of painful to be, like, you know, referred to by, like, you know, even though I said I am fine with any pronouns, really, it is just, it's like, oh, you're a girl, oh, you're a girl, oh, you're a girl, when you getting a husband? And it's just that constant level of just like, oh, I can't tell you the truth or I'd be potentially beaten.
I use it as a sword, I suppose, or use it as a shield or as a talisman, something positive, not a weapon, but something positive. To take forward, to protect myself in those male-dominated spaces, but also to be proud of who I am. But it did create problems for me. It did shut certain doors.
People feel like almost entitled to, like, just ask these weird questions, and I'm like, mate, Wikipedia exists. Like,
had the term non-binary been around when I was a teenager, then I would have very happily put myself in that box and been much happier.
Year 9, we had, I think, one gay couple in, like, the little flashcards we had, for one thing, and it was like a rape scenario, and I remember being really pissed off. Like, I was like, that's the only thing you've mentioned about gay people, and it's a fucking date rape scenario.
Like, stop relying on us to educate you when you've been the one to oppress us for so long.
And I've got this really cool image of, it's like a drawing of somebody going, oh, label, and throwing it away. And then another person picking it up going, oh, what's this? Oh my gosh, this is mine.
Somebody that had grown up in a very straight environment.
Yeah, that's nice to know. And question 12. Can you tell me about a positive experience or experiences as being part of the LGBTQIA+ community?
Yeah, gosh, where do I start? When, I don't know, how old am I now? 2007, like 13 years ago. Oh my gosh. I keep forgetting that I'm not young. Well, I'm not old either, though. When I was living in London, I hung out with, I used to go to this place called Bar Whatever. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's quite popular in London, and it was whatever because you could be whatever you wanted to be when you were there. You could be whoever you were when you were there, and it was and it's funny because this is before I realised that the term non-binary was about. As a university were like, oh, diversity, can we use you please? And I was like, you know, and the attention whore in me was like, yes, go on then. And
oh, that's interesting. So, like, when I asked you earlier if it's prohibited you, do you feel like it's, in a way, you've got more opportunities?
Yeah, I do feel like I've had that experience, yeah.
In an unspoken sense, closes some doors for me.
So, you know, once you come out, you never stop coming out.
So I'm really lucky in that sense, and I do know that I'm lucky. However, using the word lesbian now feels really strange in a contemporary context when we are, you know, sometimes I do use the word queer because it's a more inclusive term and it involves the whole community.
And when people look at me, they won't, you know, they'll see a female and they'll just say she, her. But, you know, as time goes on, it gets a bit tiring, especially when it's people I've known for a while now, kind of thing. So it's not, this is the thing, it's not one big negative experience. It's just a really small, I don't know, Chinese torture kind of thing, where it's just a drip of water, but it continues, that drip of water continues.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's more about microaggressions rather than anything else.
Sometimes it's been of benefit in the sense that I am part of a community that seeks creative experiences, that seeks well-being, or just really needs that right now, particularly in the state that the world is currently in.
But a few years ago, I was working in a library, and I remember one person was like, so do you call your, so you've got a female partner, haven't you? I was like, yeah. So it was like, do you call her your wife? I was like, yeah, because we're married. And she laughed. She was like, you're so crazy. I was like, I was so confused. But that's the only kind of ignorance I've received, really. So I've considered myself quite lucky. And
like I have an instant point of connection with other people who are of the same sexual orientation, and this is not in a romantic sense, very much in terms of life experience and similar stories and similar process, and it is a term which has been reclaimed from its historically negative meaning. So that is something that I'm quite interested in using as a word, and as an empowered word, as an inclusive word. So I'm a queer person within a subsection of lesbianism, if that makes sense. So that's how I sort of navigate that experience. However, I feel when I say that I'm queer, that I feel more at one with a younger generation.
The people who are in more privileged positions that challenge the idea of labels. It's usually the white, cis, het, middle class person who questions why everyone needs a label, kind of thing. And I know from that point of view, it's like, well, because of who you are, you've not had to put a label on yourself and you've had that freedom.